The Lollipop Man. A person who stops traffic by holding a circular sign on a pole to allow children to cross a road safely. But before we get to the definition and what a Lollipop Man does, there's a lot of weird things around Lollipop Men. Lots of weird references. And the candy man or the candy shop is also linked.
Welcome to the candy shop.
Yeah. So seductive. I take you to the candy shop. So I live it. Like a lollipop.
The lollipop man, the candy shop, the candy man, the ice cream man are all linked to the same thing, with all hidden sexual references. And just to prove that, listen to this song.
Oh, the Lollipop Man has a great big stick, and all that he charges is a penny a lick, and he gets it out whenever he can. He's a dirty old devil, is a Lollipop Man. Who is this with his spurty spout? A dribbly cone, you can suck it all out. And a knick-a-knock of glory, it's the ice cream man. But he cannot hold a candle to the Lollipop Man. For the Lollipop Man has a great big stick, and all that he charges is a penny a lick, and he whips it out whenever he can. He's a dirty old devil, is the Lollipop Man.
But with all this said, there are sexual references, but I still feel it's edging towards something else. The thing that candy and lollipops and sweets all have in common is they're all made out of sugar and start off whole, and once sucked become nothing. Now this could be seen as an allegory or story for us. We start off whole until we are sucked and sucked and sucked until there is nothing left. Essentially, all children's objects and things could be looked at a little differently. Just as I've mentioned with the ice cream man, the candy man, even the lollipop man all offer something, entice or assist children with something. And the horrible thing is, the most purest things to the eye are in fact the most rotten. As we know, candy rots the teeth and degrades the health. And even with professions such as priests, teachers and even ice cream men, are some of the best disguises for those wishing to harm children under the guise of being nice. And this goes further than sexual regard. Think of what the candy man, the ice cream man, etc. actually do. Provides children with an object that degrades their health, and in turn parents thank them for it. All these objects, candy, ice cream, sweets, cotton candy, all things made of sugar that again appear nice to the eye but result in poor health. Programming the body early on so it craves it. And with all these objects, they start off whole as explained and end up as nothing, mostly via sucking. Again, a sexual reference, but looked at in terms of the physical, mental and emotional draining of ourselves. We are being sucked. Even with balloons, children love them. But imagine a child as an empty balloon, and then after the education they receive, the programming, the gas or air that blows them up, and that balloon being attached to a string, and that string can be pulled and directed accordingly. The balloon is not essentially free. The string could ultimately be replaced by a stick, like a stick man. The balloon, once inflated, either pops or deflates. The gas or air, which is nothingness, which has filled the balloon. The balloon could be seen as a twisted allegory for our head, filled with nothing. But for some reason the Lollipop Man reminds me of the ferryman, Charon, the crosser of souls from one side to the other, associated with death, usually a river, and the ancients called the roads we drive on today concrete rivers. It's funny also how lollipop men and ladies cross over children, and their purpose is to cross over children.
To the underworld with everybody's favourite ferryman of the dead, Charon. Now I say everybody's favourite ferryman of the dead, but realistically it's the only one that I know of. Daimon were often either seen as lesser deities or guiding spirits, which certainly seems to be the case for our boatman. His primary role was to ferry the souls of the dead from the world above to the world below, across the rivers Acheron and the river Styx, which divided the world of the living from the world of the dead. He would of course do this in his boat, hence the skiff being his symbol. Controlling the supply of new souls into the underworld meant that he would have been extremely valued by Hades, but this was a service that he would gladly perform for his king. He would also work alongside the god Hermes, who would gather and guide the dead to him for transportation. But the ferryman of the dead certainly didn't run a free taxi service. As with many things in life, there always seems to be a price, and the underworld seemed to be the same. The fee, however, was just one obelisk coin, a modest price that most families could afford to pay. Classically, Charon is depicted as an ugly bearded man with a large crooked nose carrying around the pole that he uses as a paddle. His eyes like hollow furnaces of fire. A girdle foul with grease binds his obscene attire. Charon makes an appearance in the first part of Dante's poem, which many of you will know as Dante's Inferno. Charon is the first mythological character that Dante meets in his journey through the underworld, and like Virgil describes him as having eyes of fire. Michelangelo's depiction of Charon is definitely an interesting one to say the least. The Roman depictions of Charon are definitely more repulsive, often highlighting his bluish-grey skin, his tusked mouth and his hooked nose. As well as a large pole, he was seen carrying around a double-headed mallet, and given that the Romans saw him more as a demon of death, we can only assume that this mallet would have been used to beat those who could not afford to pay him. It's not really a huge surprise that his appearance will change over time. Over the years, Charon would go on to appear in numerous stories and poems, but in most he simply performed his task of ferrying the dead. There is one story, however, where he denied the hero Heracles passage, and so the hero proceeded to beat Charon with his own paddle and enter the underworld anyway. So we can definitely see that not all daimon had the power of a god or goddess. Like many deities associated with death in Greek mythology, Charon is neither good nor bad, but someone who merely performs a much needed task, albeit for a small fee.
But you would think this would be more associated with birth and children. The Jewish story of the angel of conception named Layla, bringer of souls and the human seed together inside the womb. And the positioning of the letters of Layla is very similar to Lolly. However, it seems the Lollipop Man or woman wasn't intended to be positive. The Lollipop Man or woman is like Layla in terms of the name and also the connection with children, but then it falls more to Charon and the dead. As once we are indoctrinated with the education system, we are seen to be dead. Us the dead, being led to other places. Schools that train us to become dark and selfish. And that's all schools do. The curriculum, they call it, is wrong and backwards, promoting selfishness in children, pitting them against one another, instead of bringing them together. Schools, and the world system once entered after school, is a hell itself. For the second part of the word, we look at pop. And we refer to my pop stars video associating the pop with being taken somewhere quickly, being taken over the road, being taken from one side to the other, from good to evil, from pure to indoctrinated. Once processed through the schools, all the marketing and the propaganda works, and we become another cog in the system. The other thing with Lollipop that I just want to point out is it was made a key word quite a long time ago now, with lollipops prompting children,
I know you're here somewhere,
making their eyes light up with programming often handed out at doctors and even dentists. The lollipop has been shortened and is used mainly today as LOL, laugh out loud, which ultimately is mocking the crooked smile that many wear. Not only that, making us laugh about things when we really shouldn't. Lollipop men or women hold their stick or sign, and it's very similar to the one Charon has. The Lollipop man or woman steps into the road, which can be seen as a river. The crossing highlighted by the black and white strips, which becomes a bridge essentially when signalled by the lollipop person. The traffic stop, allowing the children and people to cross from one side to another. The stop can be seen as don't ask questions, intended towards children, but also to the stopping of traffic of the mine, which allows one to cross to other places. Only by stopping the mine, stopping the traffic, can one cross over, can the crossover be done or made. Just like a death, this is when it happens, the mine ceases and the crossover happens. I feel the whole process of children going to school in the education system is a ritual of the underworld to worship Hades or Satan, and or Egyptian it seems. As Anu or Anubis plays a big part also, children catch buzzes to school, the school buzz. We change the I in Anubis to a U, it makes a new bus, which has buzz at the end of it.
Anubis, come forth.
From the crossing, they usually cross the road to the school via the Lollipop Man, which has already been discussed. Outside of the schools are usually decorations, they call it, often gargoyles or dog statues, which represent Cerberus, the hellhound that guards the gates of the underworld. His duty is to not let people leave hell. Like once you enter school, you can't leave until the specified time. The gates are locked. Once entering, class begins where children begin their unknown, unwilling, daily pledge and learning from evil. Remember, children learn their ABCs at school and also their 1, 2, 3s. ABC's numerical value is the same as 1, 2, 3. Add them all up and it's 6. Kids go to school 9 till 3. 3 9s, 999, inverted is 666. In the Greek underworld, the souls of the dead still existed, but they are insubstantial, and filtered around the underworld with no sense of purpose. Their lives in the underworld were very neutral, so all social status and political positions were eliminated, and no one was able to use their previous lives to their advantage in the underworld. Lucian described the people of the underworld as simple skeletons. They are indistinguishable from one another, and it is impossible to tell who was wealthy or important. However, this view of the underworld was not universal. Homer depicts the dead as keeping their familiar faces. Now we could relate all this to us here. What we were and what we are, we do not know. It is impossible to tell who is who here. The internal parts of ourselves, essentially clothed in our bodies, unable to tell who is who. We, like the dead or zombies, aimlessly moving around, stripped of who we were, unable to advance due to not knowing who we were. There are many stories of hell breaching the earth, and it seems this has happened, but there has been no great battle or story of that can be seen. No blazing fires or skies filled with demons. It is hidden, unseen, in the shadows, dressed up all sweet, with a nice little bow, everything inverted, presented in a nice way, but really all inverted and evil, making the person unaware what is actually happening. It's not a consensual agreement, but one filled with trickery and deceit. Lollipops, sweet to the eye and taste, but then lead to rot. And we are very much like lollipops ourselves. We start off sweet and whole. Before long we are sucked and sucked until there is nothing left. Just a stick man.